Hello there, welcome to Back to the Basics, an IDPE podcast in association with Schools Management Plus. I am Simon Lerwill, the Director of Development at Marlborough College and Chair of IDPE. And each week we will hear from an experienced development leader who is part of IDPE's New to Development programme and an expert in a particular area of fundraising and engagement. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Kathrin Ostermann, Director of Development and Alumni Relations at City of London School. Kathrin is going to be sharing her experience and expertise on development strategies. No small topic. But before we get to that, we're going to start with our usual icebreaker question. So, what's the fundraising or engagement idea you wish you'd thought of and why?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Simon. And it's nice to see your face, even though others will only hear your voice. I was thinking about this, and there's so much across the sector, and especially outside of my immediate sector. And actually, the example I want to use is the NHS blood donor programme, because that could be a really dry experience, even though it's obviously so life-saving. And what I love about what they do is when you donate blood, few weeks, days, weeks, however long it might take, you get a text message to say it's been used.
Wow.
And that is the most thrilling moment of a tangible impact of an act that you've done for your biscuit and squash, but actually it makes it really real and real life. So although I appreciate that isn't, that's so impactful in terms of life and death, that isn't possible in all sectors, I think that kind of unexpected, tangible thing landing in your inbox or on your phone is the idea I wish I'd come up with, because it really makes you think, oh yeah, goodness, I've done something amazing there and I want to do it again.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that. That is very impressive kind of stewardship, direct impact. Yeah, very neat. Okay, well, no doubt that's come from your interesting and varied career, because you're someone who seems to have worked in every type of institution. You've worked in HE at King's College London, you've worked in the arts at Tate, and in health at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital, and now in schools. So out of interest, what do you think schools can learn from other sectors?
So I think there's a kind of the ambition, I suppose, of what can be possible. And I think the kind of confidence to do that, it's definitely getting better within the school sector, but I think there's still a part of us that feels fundraising has to be done quite softly and occasionally behind closed doors, rather than celebrating our institutions as institutions that raise money for really amazing causes. And I think that pride in your cause and in the product, if we want to call it that, especially around bursaries, is something we want to be taking from, especially the HE sector and the health sector. And we're not curing cancer, I'm not saying that, but we are doing some really life-changing activities that allow a young person to have a different path in the life that they may have had. So I think for me, having that audacity, I suppose, to believe in what we're doing, and then being really open in what we're doing, we need to do that, as well as some of those organisations in the sector. And some of that is linked, and schools have definitely got better at that. That means investing in fundraising, professionalising fundraising, being comfortable to spend money on fundraising, and knowing that that return may not be there in year one, but actually is a long-term strategy. So that's what I would say, using those learnings from especially HE, where they're probably where we are now 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And look where the HE sector is now. It's raising billions of pounds. So we need to have that trajectory as well, and seeing it as an important part of the school as anything else that we do.
To be proud and be confident. I like
Absolutely.
that. Okay, let's move on to the main theme of the podcast, which is development strategy. Be a dry subject, but I'm sure we're going to make it really engaging. And it's pretty fundamental, isn't it, to everything? Because if you think of your team, data, alumni relations, regular giving, major gifts, legacies, whatever theme we might talk about in other podcasts, they all hang from your development strategy, right? So you've got to spend time on it and get it right. So first question, what is the number one reason for having a development strategy then?
So you know what you're doing and why and to what end. because actually it gives you a roadmap of what you're trying to achieve. It gives others a roadmap of what you're trying to achieve, and it can hold you, well, it should hold you to account. So actually, what is it you're there to deliver, and how will you be judged as successful? And that's for your own personal success, for your team's success, to understand where they're trying to get to, but also internally with your stakeholders. If you haven't written down a plan, you can't change it, and also you're not really sure why you're there. So for me, a strategy, which can feel like a really overwhelming bit of work, but until you know why you're there and for what reason, it's really hard to really decide what to do even. So for me, a strategy is the first thing you do, and it doesn't need to be a tome of pages and pages and pages, but actually if anyone asks you why are you here, and anyone in your team has asked that, you should have a really consistent answer, and you can only have that if you've thought about it and you've got a strategy behind your thinking.
And when we've spoken before, you talked about the why and the what not. So
yes,
so actually it's also useful to show what you're not going to do.
Absolutely, and it gives you the confidence to say, yes, that sounds like a great idea, but it will take me away from my core business. And that isn't like you say no to everything, because I think any good development professional has to be nimble when they need to be and look at opportunities that maybe you haven't anticipated when you were writing that strategy. But a strategy will exactly tell you why, and then also tell you the what not, which can so easily divert your time, your resource, your team to not really any great outcome. It might be a nice outcome, but it hasn't really moved forward.
I think for development officers in schools particularly, that the whatnot is really important, because you can get asked to do lots of things. And,
suddenly, fundraising and alumni can be the answer to everything or nothing.
To all things. So what tips have you got then for creating your strategy? So how do you create this plan, this roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, how I did it. So I've been at City 7 years. So in my first year, it was understanding the new institution and sector that I was in. So I would urge anyone to, even if they've been in a school before and moving to another school, it's understanding the environment you find yourself in, to understand what it is you're there to do, because it won't always be the same answer. So for me, it's, I want to raise money. That's it. And how I do that is, various different ways, but others will have different answers to that. So for me, it's gathering that information and the context of your institution that will allow you to write a strategy that is relevant to your institution. Simon talked briefly previously about the cut and paste job, which, it can, and I did this a little bit. Well, this worked in the university sector. Why wouldn't it work here? And sometimes it may, and you may get lucky, but actually that isn't always the right answer. And you need to be cognizant of your environment, sensitive to it as well, to understand who your audience is, what kind of a journey you're taking your stakeholders on, especially. So for instance, someone might say to you, well, you should start raising money for an endowment, but that might not be the right thing for your institution or where they are right now. So I think it is about making sure it is appropriate for your setting, realistic for your setting, and also is in a time frame. So my first strategy was a 3-year strategy, because that allows you to get from A to B in a managed way without expecting everything to happen in year 1, or indeed you're still kicking around in year 5 doing the same thing. So that felt to me like quite a nice time frame.
Yeah, and I'm with you on the copy and paste. I think actually that's a particular danger when you move from one school to another, because you're the second school and you go, well, I've worked in schools, I know how this works.
Yep.
The danger is, you try something that worked in the first school, but actually it's not right for the new context, new strategy. And I think that's a real danger.
Yeah. And I think you've got, you'll have different strengths, because who's your head? Like, what's their strength, or your governing body, or your alumni? There's, so all sorts of things. And obviously don't go down a rabbit hole of trying to find out everything, but equally just for me, it was about getting a feel for the place. And how I could add value.
And really importantly, align your development strategy to the school strategy. And
yes.
That's a really obvious point. But if your school's big thing is music, then you're probably going to be looking at music buildings and music bursaries. Exactly. If your school's a big sports school, it's probably going to be sports scholarships and sport bursaries and sport facilities. And the more the development strategy can align and support the school strategy.
Yes. And equally making sure you are not devising the strategy for the school to fit your fundraising.
Yeah.
So, often the question might be, what's your strategy around bursaries? And if the answer is, well, how much can you raise? That's not the right thing. So it's understanding, where does the school want to get to? And then how can fundraising and engagement help towards that, rather than what can fundraising do? So that's going to be the school strategy. So totally agree. It's about you're working towards the school strategy, not the other way around.
So let's say you've now developed your strategy, right? You've worked out why you're doing it and what your strategy is and how you're going to get there. What about stakeholder management? Because these strategies rely on lots of people outside of the development team.
Yeah.
So how do you go about that?
Yeah, so that was a really interesting sort of development for me. So my jobs before the school were always not directly into the board or into the CEO of an institution, for instance. So it was a learning for me, but it's really thrilling to be able to work with your senior stakeholders, especially. So for me, it is always keeping them up to date on your activities in an appropriate way to how they operate. So I think any development professional in any school would expect to have input or be able to attend a governing board meeting to get to know those governors and who are your champions, because it's not going to be everyone and it doesn't need to be everyone, so that you are engaging those governors who will then be your supporters, even when you're not in the room. So spending time on understanding and getting to know your stakeholders might feel like quite a hard slog sometimes, but the rewards are just unprecedented, really, because it opens up everything. Opens up investment in your team. It opens up them supporting your fundraising. It opens up them understanding how fundraising works. So again, you're not sitting around a table or hearing third hand, why have you not raised £10 million this year? It's making sure that you're, without patronizing, you are educating your stakeholders in what and how fundraising works. Some of them will be really well versed in it. I'm really lucky. I've got governors who might be sitting on boards at universities or at other charities, but also putting it into your school context, especially if you're starting your program from scratch, or there's been a huge change in direction or leadership that will impact your fundraising. So the better you know your stakeholders at the governing boards, the easier. And then more internally, making sure those key colleagues around the senior management table are on board and understand what you're doing, and then working out which of those teachers and professional services staff will be your champions as well. And I think my biggest learning, and we're all people pleasers, that's why we work in fundraising, is knowing that not all teachers will understand what you do or care about what you do in the nicest way, because they've got so much on, and that's okay. But working out who those champions will be that will enhance your fundraising or will help with your alumni engagement. So it's a classic stakeholder mapping, isn't it? Much like you would a prospect list. How are you going to move these relationships forward, and who's going to be your key people?
Yeah, I mean, at Marlborough, we have 15 or 20 staff campaign champions, teaching and support staff who meet every term, and there are flag wavers.
Yeah, and it's really important for your other donors, and so your alumni, your parents, to see, if you have an impact report, for instance, or a donor list, to see governors on that list, to see staff on that list. And that isn't about the amount of giving, it's the number of donors. So that actually, if you're going to ask a parent or alumnus to donate, it's much more powerful if you yourself are donating, or indeed the other, if a head is doing the asking, you'll join me as a donor.
Yes.
So seeing those donor lists.
We're all in this together.
Yeah, we're all, if you don't believe in it enough, why should I? So,
Well, we're running out of time, but what's the one piece of advice you'd wish you'd been given when you started out?
In fundraising or at the school?
Either, maybe in fundraising.
So I think I probably was given this, but I probably ignored it at the time, is that being told no is no bad thing, and it's don't take it personally. And I always think you might get a no, but it might not be a no forever, or you might just not be the right place for someone's philanthropy, and that's okay. And being comfortable with that, and it doesn't need to be a kind of terrible moment. It can be something, okay, maybe I didn't do that quite as well as I could have, or the project isn't the right one, but actually I will, continue that relationship if I think it's worth doing, or if they want us to. But equally understanding that some people don't want to be engaged with, and that's okay. And even though the rejection might hurt in the moment, it's the right thing to do, because you can only look after so many relationships. So that's probably wise.
Yeah, sometimes a cross against a name on a list is okay, because it helps you focus on the other names.
Exactly.
I'm going to start a new feature, the best piece of advice you've ignored. That's going to be right. Well, look, thank you so much, Kathrin, for sharing your time and expertise today. Been really interesting to hear about your approach to development strategy at the City of London School. And finally, just a reminder that you can hear more from Kathrin talking about development strategies, if you want to, as part of the IDPE's New to Development programme, which has launched next month and provides an introduction to all the fundamentals of schools fundraising and engagement. So whether you're new to the sector or in the process of setting up a development office, please head to the IDPE website to find out more. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Kathrin.
Thank you. Bye.